So if you don't know me, I'm the girl who be in her word, but don't be in her word. But the word literally comes and find me. Like when I tell you the word literally comes and find me, I mean in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. I mean in my restful sleep. The word literally comes and find me. And I love that for me. Okay. That's me and God's relationship. So we're just gonna jump into it. Because about 4 weeks ago, I woke up on a Sunday and I said, why do I just want to lay down and die? And immediately I thought about the widow woman in 1 Kings 17. And so that's what we're talking about today. We're just going to start at the top and just take it all the way down.
Here we are, 1 Kings 17. Now Elijah, who was a Tishbe in Gilead, told King Ahab, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, the God I serve, there will be no dew or rain during the next few years until I give the word. Then the Lord said to Elijah, go to the east and hide in the Kerith brook, near where it enters the Jordan River. Drink from the brook and eat what the ravens bring you, for I have commanded them to bring you food. So Elijah did as the Lord told him and camped beside Kerith brook, east of the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat each morning and evening, and he drank from the brook. But after a while, the brook dried up, for there was no rainfall anywhere in the land. Then the Lord said to Elijah, go and live in the village of Zarephath, near the city of Sidon. I have instructed a widow there to feed you. So he went to Zarephath. As he arrived at the gate of the village, he saw a widow gathering sticks and asked her, would you please bring me a little water in a cup? As she was going to get it, he called to her, bring me a bite of bread too. But the woman said, I swear by the Lord your God that I don't have a single piece of bread in the house, and I have only a handful of flour left in the jar and a little cooking oil in the bottom of the jug. I was just gathering a few sticks to cook this last meal, and then my son and I will die. But Elijah said to her, do not be afraid. Go ahead and do just what you said. But make a little bread for me first. Then use what's left to prepare a meal for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time the Lord sends the rain and the crops grow again. So she did as Elijah said, and she and Elijah and her family continued to eat for many days. There was always enough flour and olive oil left in the containers, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. Sometime later, the woman's son became sick. He grew worse and worse, and finally he died. Then she said to Elijah, O man of God, what have you done to me? Have you come here to point out my sins and kill my son? But Elijah replied, give me your son. And he took the child's body from her arms, carried him up the stairs to the room where he was staying, and laid the body on his bed. Then Elijah cried out to the Lord, O Lord, my God, why have you brought tragedy to this widow who has opened her home to me, causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself out over the child 3 times, cried out to the Lord, O Lord my God, please let this child's life return to him. The Lord heard Elijah's prayer, and the life of the child returned, and he revived. And Elijah brought him down from the upper room and gave him to his mother. Look, he said, your son is alive. Then the woman said to Elijah, now I know for sure that you are a man of God, and that the Lord truly speaks through you.
So there's a few key points. Let's just set the tone for what's happening in this chapter.
So we see that Elijah is talking to King Ahab, and he's basically telling him, look, there's going to be no rain, no dew for the next few years until I give the word.
Which means they were getting ready to hit a drought, which means that there was going to be no crops, no growing, no nothing that was going to be able to take place in the land. Pay attention to this, because then after that,
the Lord sends Elijah to the brook. He eats, he drinks,
and then guess what? The water dries up.
And so now Elijah has to move on. But the Lord says to him, go to Zarephath. I might be saying that wrong. There's going to be a widow woman that's going to be there to feed you. And so Elijah meets this woman. And as soon as he gets to the gate, it says in verse 10, as he arrived at the gate of the village, he saw a widow gathering sticks, and he asked her, would you please bring me a little water in a cup?
Elijah saw her and knew her. But then we see what it looks like to be in her shoes, because after he says, and bring me a bite of bread, she confesses that her situation is this. She doesn't have much. She doesn't have a piece of bread to give him in that moment. She only has a handful of flour, a little cooking oil, the bottom of the jug. There was a level of desperation. This woman felt like she had no other option. This woman felt like her situation was so hard, so downtrodden, that the only thing she could do was gather sticks, cook it, and make their last meal. And then her and her son was going to lay down and die.
So Elijah tells her to do what she said she was going to do. But first to make him something. And then use what's left to prepare herself and her son a meal. Now remember, this woman said she had a handful of flour and a little bit of oil left in the jar. But Elijah said to use that to make him something, and then use what's left. And then he gives her the word of the Lord. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time the Lord sends the rain and the crops grow again. But remember, it was at Elijah's word that the rain was coming, and it wasn't going to happen for a few years. Pay attention to this, because what I'm understanding from this is, because it would be a few years, this woman had a level of security now in a place where there was insecurity. She had a level of security of knowing that God would provide the food that she needed for her and her son. So she does. And there was always, verse 16, and there was always flour and olive oil left in the containers, just as the Lord had promised through Elijah. But sometime later, the woman's son became sick. He grew worse and worse, and finally he died. Take note of this moment right here. Then she said to Elijah, "O man of God, what have you done to me?" Her question was, what have you done to me? Have you come to point out my sins and kill my son? When I was reading this, I've read this so many times before, but recently when I was reading this, the Lord said to me, she spoke the word of death over her son and herself. And then when she lived it out, it was a problem. The thing is, we often say things in a time where our situation is terrible. Our situation looks like there's no hope. Our situation looks like there's no possible way that it could shift. There's no possible way that it can change. This woman, in a level of desperation, in a time of desperation, time where she was in lack, in a time where she thought there was no other option but for her to make a last meal for her and her son. She literally said that she was going to make this meal and they both were going to lay down and die. But yet, when the evidence of the words that she spoke in a previous season show up to her, she's now questioning why Elijah's done this to her. If Elijah has come to point out her sins and to kill her son. But one of the things that the Lord said is, too often we speak words in seasons where life is difficult, in seasons where things are tough, in seasons where it looks like it's not possible to shift. And then when it does shift, we forget the words that we spoke in the past season, as if we never spoke it, as if God is not going to hold an account for every word that we've ever spoken. So guess what now? Here it is now. She's in the time of her life where God provided a miracle through the lack that she thought she was facing, where God provided the food that she did not have, where God provided for her in a time, in a season, and a space where she thought there was nothing. Catch this. And now here it is. She's at the mercy of Elijah, asking him, "What have you done to me? Have you come to point out my sins and kill my son?" But those were the words that she spoke. That's what she said concerning herself and her son. I just came to remind you that the words that you speak are so important. Elijah said in the beginning in verse 1 that the rain and the dew would not hit the earth until he gave the word. The woman spoke the word of death over herself and her son. And then in a time of her life where her life is flourishing, in a time of her life where she's walking out the miracle, she's now questioning why she's living out the very thing she spoke in the past season. Because I need you to take into account that you may be in a difficult season of your life. You may be going through some things right now. It may be very difficult for you now in this season. The seeds that you sow in the season are important. We see this from her life. She had to walk out the very thing that she spoke. And now here it is in the time of a miracle, in the time where God is doing what he said he would do. Catch it. The Lord said that she would always have olive oil. She would always have flour until
until the rain hit the earth, which means she had a few years of holding fast to what God said. She had a few years of watching the miracle of what God said, but it said in the scripture sometime later. It wasn't a few years later. It wasn't a long time later, but it was sometime later. I need you to catch this, because too often we speak idle words in a season where our life is difficult. Our life is hard. Our life looks like there's no way of coming up, but the words that you speak are important. This woman said her and her son was going to lay down and die. And when you're living out the miracle in which God is walking you through in the days to come, when it doesn't turn out exactly the way you think, or something happens, take an account of what you said. Recall back what you said in the season when you didn't think it was possible, in the season where you said God wouldn't do it. Take an account of what you spoke, because it's going to be those idle words that may show up again. So then Elijah says, give me your son. So she places her son's dead body into Elijah's hand. She doesn't say, no, he's dead, get away. No, she doesn't stay angry. She asks those two questions and then gives her son over to Elijah. Elijah then takes the boy's body into the upper room, stretched out across the body. Then Elijah cried out, why have you brought this tragedy to this woman, this widow, who has opened her home to me and caused her son to die? He stretched out over this child's body 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Oh Lord, my God, please let this child's life return to him." I want you to hear this. The Lord heard Elijah's prayer. So we see that even though this woman spoke death over herself and her son, and her situation changed, and death came upon her son, there was someone who interceded on behalf of her son. The Lord heard Elijah's prayer, and the life returned to the child's body, and he was revived. I want to remind you that even though you spoke some words in the past, and you may see the evidence of the words that you spoke in that past season, I want you to know that the Lord will hear your prayers the same way he heard Elijah's. Elijah and the mother did not stay in a place where they were mad at God because of what happened to the boy. But Elijah said, please let this child's life return to him. Before that, he says, why have you brought tragedy to this widow who has opened her home to me and caused her son to die? This is the part that I want you to take hold to. Then Elijah brought him down from the upper room and gave him to his mother. Look, he said, your son is alive. And I remember saying, well, Lord, why did Elijah have to say that the son was alive? She could have looked at the boy and saw that he was alive. But he now had to speak the opposite of what she spoke concerning that boy. I said, well, Lord, why did Elijah have to say he's alive? I mean, couldn't the mother see that? I'm pretty sure the boy was gasping for air, like his arms were moving. I'm sure there was some type of evidence of life. And then the Lord reminded me that she said that her and her son were going to lay down and die. There are power in the words that you speak concerning your situation with those that are in your life. And even when you may be feeling like life is happening to you, you're getting hit left and right, I need you to remember, not for me, but for you, I need you to remember that the words that you speak, even in that season, are important. Then Elijah had to say, your son is alive. I said, Lord, why did Elijah have to tell her? Because the woman said that her and her son were going to lay down and die. Elijah then had to speak contrary to what the woman had spoken, because over his life sat the declaration of death. After the Lord revived him back, how now then had to speak the word of life over his son and say that your son is alive. And the definition, it says, of alive, it says alive primarily means having life, living, and not dead. So Elijah now had to come and speak contrary. He had to come and speak against. He had to come and battle with the word of what the mother had spoken over her son. Then she turns around in verse 24 and says, now I know for sure that you are a man of God. that the Lord truly speaks through you. You speak even in that season are important. Because when you are walking out the miracle, when you are walking out the evidence of who God is, you are walking out the miracle of what God says that he will do. When you are looking at God and you are dancing out your clothes like David, when you are standing in the place of victory, I need you to know that it's coming. The place of victory is coming even when you don't see it. Even when you're looking off to the horizon and you don't see it. There's more that God will reveal through this. I promise you, we will be back here again.